My name is Owen. I'm 32 years old, and I never thought my own parents would try to steal my home. Growing up, my sister was always the golden child, but what happened last year still shocks me. After saving for years, I finally bought my dream apartment in Boston, renovated it perfectly, and was settling in. Then my parents dropped a bombshell demand that left me speechless. Before I dive into how my own parents tried to take away everything I worked for, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with entitled family members. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Chicago with my parents and younger sister Melissa. My dad worked as an accountant, while my mom taught elementary school. We weren't rich, but we had enough for a comfortable life. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect American family. But inside our home, a clear hierarchy had been established since Melissa was born when I was 4. The first memory I have of the favoritism was my 7th birthday. My parents had promised a small party with a few friends and a cake from my favorite bakery. The day before, Melissa, who was only 3 at the time, had a tantrum because she wasn't getting any presents. Instead of explaining to her that it wasn't her birthday, my parents scaled back my celebration and bought her new toys so she wouldn't feel left out. This became a pattern throughout our childhood. My events, achievements, and needs were always secondary to Melissa's feelings and desires. Christmas mornings in our house told the whole story. I would receive practical gifts like clothes, school supplies, or books, while Melissa's pile of presents towered over mine with art supplies, electronics, and whatever trendy items she had begged for. My parents explained this discrepancy by saying I was more mature and didn't need as much, but to a young boy, it felt like punishment for being responsible. In school, I excelled academically. I brought home straight A's, joined the math club, and eventually became valedictorian of my high school class. My achievements were acknowledged with brief nods and comments like, "That's what we expect from you, Owen." Meanwhile, Melissa struggled to maintain C grades, but any small improvement was celebrated lavishly. When she managed to get a B- in art class, my parents took the entire family out to an expensive restaurant and hung her mediocre watercolor painting in the living room like it was a masterpiece. "Look at how she captures emotion in her brushstrokes," my mother would gush to visitors, while my science fair trophies collected dust in my bedroom closet. My father would proudly tell his friends Melissa has the creative talent in the family, as if my logical mind was somehow a deficit rather than an asset. By the time I reached high school, I had stopped seeking their approval altogether. I threw myself into academics and took on part-time jobs at the local grocery store and tutoring younger students. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account that only I could access. Somehow, I knew even then that I would need to forge my own path without family support. Meanwhile, Melissa was developing an entitled attitude that my parents continuously reinforced. She would refuse to do chores because it would interrupt her creative flow. When she wrecked the car they bought her for her 16th birthday, they replaced it within a week. When she wanted to attend expensive summer art camps, they found the money even if it meant taking out a second mortgage on the house. During my senior year, I received acceptance letters from several prestigious universities, including MIT and Stanford. I was thrilled, but when I brought up the topic of college funds, my parents looked uncomfortable. "We've had to adjust our savings priorities," my father explained awkwardly. I soon discovered that the college fund they had started for me had been depleted to pay for Melissa's private art lessons, specialty supplies, and a cultural enrichment trip to Europe. The contrast became even more stark when college time arrived. I cobbled together scholarships, loans, and worked 30 hours a week alongside a full course load at a state university. Meanwhile, Melissa attended an expensive private art school in New York, fully funded by my parents. They rented her a studio apartment near campus, while I lived in a cramped dorm room with 3 roommates. During holiday breaks, I would come home exhausted from balancing work and studies, only to hear endless dinner conversations about Melissa's artistic journey and potential. "She's going to be the next Georgia O'Keeffe," my mother would proclaim, while my father nodded in agreement. Neither of them ever asked about my computer science projects or internship applications. By graduation, the emotional distance between us had grown into a chasm. I had built a protective wall around myself, no longer expecting anything from the people who should have been my biggest supporters. After graduating with a computer science degree, I faced the brutal entry-level job market during an economic downturn. While my classmates moved back home to save money, I knew that wasn't an option for me. My parents' house had long ceased to feel like home, and returning would mean watching Melissa continue to receive preferential treatment while I struggled to build my career. I rented a tiny studio apartment with peeling paint and unreliable heating in Chicago's North Side. It was all I could afford on my starting salary as a junior developer at a small tech company. The job paid barely enough to cover rent, student loan payments, and ramen noodles, but it gave me valuable experience. I worked 14-hour days taking on every project I could to prove my value to the company. During those early years, I lived with almost monastic simplicity. No cable television, no eating out, no new clothes, unless absolutely necessary. Every spare dollar went toward paying down my student loans and building an emergency fund. While friends posted photos of vacations and new cars on social media, I was focused on a different kind of freedom. My big break came 3 years into my career when I developed a software solution that saved our biggest client millions in operational costs. This success earned me a promotion and a modest bonus, which I immediately invested in coding boot camps and advanced certification courses. Each new skill made me more valuable in the job market. By my late 20s, I had worked my way up to senior developer positions, changing companies strategically to increase my salary with each move. I developed a reputation for solving complex problems and delivering projects ahead of schedule. Recruiters started reaching out with opportunities, and for the first time, I felt I had options. 7 years ago, I was approached by a major tech company in Boston with an offer I couldn't refuse: double my current salary, stock options, and the chance to lead my own team. The decision to move across the country was easy. I had few strong ties in Chicago, and Boston represented a fresh start in a city known for innovation. The first 2 years in Boston, I lived frugally in a small, one-bedroom apartment, focusing on excelling in my new role. My team's success led to further promotions and bonuses. I maxed out my retirement contributions and continued to live well below my means, while my savings grew steadily. My goal was clear: I wanted to own property in a city where real estate prices seemed to climb by the month. House hunting in Boston was humbling. Even with my tech salary, many neighborhoods were simply out of reach. I spent weekends touring properties, learning about mortgages, and calculating property taxes. After nearly a year of searching, I found a 2-bedroom corner unit in a converted historic building in Cambridge. The original hardwood floors, 12-foot ceilings, and large windows overlooking a tree-lined street instantly felt right. The asking price was steep, but years of disciplined saving had prepared me for this moment. I made a competitive offer, and after a tense bidding war, received the call that changed everything. The apartment was mine. I remember sitting on the floor of my rental keys in hand, overwhelmed by the realization that I had achieved this completely on my own. The renovation process was both exciting and exhausting. I took 3 weeks of vacation time to oversee the most critical work. The outdated kitchen was gutted and rebuilt with quartz countertops and stainless steel appliances. The bathroom's ancient plumbing was replaced, and a luxurious rainfall shower installed. I spent weekends painting walls, refinishing hardwood floors, and carefully selecting furniture that complemented the apartment's character. My home office became my particular pride. I installed built-in bookshelves, a standing desk, and ergonomic furniture that supported long hours of coding. The second bedroom was set up as a guest room, though I rarely had overnight visitors. Every corner of the apartment reflected my journey and taste. For the first time since childhood, I had created a space that truly felt like home. During these years of building my career and creating my home, contact with my family had dwindled to occasional phone calls on birthdays and major holidays. I would fly back to Chicago for Christmas every other year, staying in hotels rather than my parents' house to maintain my sanity. These visits were always tense affairs, with conversations revolving around Melissa's latest artistic endeavors and little interest in my life in Boston. I had made peace with our distant relationship. I wasn't angry anymore, just detached. I had built a life I was proud of, surrounded myself with friends who valued me, and found fulfillment in my work. I didn't need my parents' approval or attention. Or so I thought, until they decided to force their way back into my life in the most entitled way imaginable. While I was building my career through hard work and persistence, Melissa was living in a carefully constructed fantasy world, fueled by my parents' endless support and her own delusions of artistic grandeur. After graduating from her expensive art school with a mediocre portfolio and few marketable skills, she did what seemed inevitable: moved back home with our parents. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement quickly became permanent. My father, approaching retirement age, spent his weekends converting their garage into a professional art studio for Melissa. They installed special lighting, climate control, and storage systems that cost thousands. My mother, meanwhile, handled the business side of Melissa's non-existent art career, creating social media accounts and contacting local galleries. From what I gathered during our limited conversations, Melissa's daily routine involved waking up around noon, spending hours choosing the perfect Instagram filter for photos of half-finished canvases, and attending gallery openings, where she would network with other aspiring artists. Actual painting seemed to be a secondary concern. Her social media portrayed her as a serious artist on the verge of breakthrough success, but the reality was far less impressive. Her art itself hadn't evolved much since college. She worked primarily in acrylic paints, creating abstract pieces that resembled what you might find in the clearance section of a furniture store. Technically, her work showed little growth despite years of expensive education. Her compositions lacked coherence. Her color choices were chaotic, rather than deliberate, and her technical skills remained stagnant. Yet in her mind, and in my parents' view, she was an undiscovered genius. My mother once sent me a newspaper clipping about a small showing Melissa had at a coffee shop owned by their neighbor's cousin. The article, clearly arranged through personal connections, described her as an emerging talent with a unique perspective. What it failed to mention was that not a single piece sold during the month-long exhibition. Financial reality didn't seem to touch Melissa's artistic journey. My parents funded everything: art supplies that gathered dust, submission fees for competitions. She didn't win professional photography of her work, and even a custom website that received minimal traffic. More significantly, they covered her living expenses entirely. At 31, my sister had never paid rent, a utility bill, or even her own cell phone plan. During one rare phone call with my father, I gently suggested that Melissa might benefit from a part-time job to supplement her art career, as many successful artists do. His response was immediate and defensive. She can't compromise her creative energy with menial work. True artists need to focus entirely on their craft. I bit my tongue rather than pointing out that throughout history, many great artists held jobs while creating their masterpieces. As my parents' retirement approached, I became increasingly concerned about their financial situation. Hints dropped during conversations suggested they had depleted a significant portion of their savings supporting Melissa. My father postponed retirement twice, and they downsized to a smaller house in a less desirable neighborhood. Yet Melissa's lifestyle remained unchanged. Her entitlement grew alongside her parents' sacrifices. During one holiday visit, I witnessed her throw a tantrum because my parents gave her a mid-range digital camera rather than the top-of-the-line model she wanted. She was 28 years old at the time. Rather than calling out this behavior, my parents apologized and promised to make it up to her. What bothered me most was Melissa's evident jealousy of my success, which manifested as dismissive comments about my soulless corporate job and how I had sold out by pursuing financial stability. "Some of us care about more than money," she would say smugly, while living entirely off our parents' dwindling resources. The irony seemed lost on everyone but me. Through mutual acquaintances and social media, I watched as Melissa's claims about her artistic career became increasingly exaggerated. She began referring to herself as a collected artist, though the only people who owned her work were family friends who received paintings as gifts. She claimed to be in talks with major galleries that, upon subtle investigation, had never heard of her. She posted about commissions that mysteriously never appeared in subsequent updates. The few small gallery showings she managed to secure came through my parents' connections and often involved fees that they paid. These exhibitions were always framed on social media as competitive selections based on artistic merit rather than the pay-to-display arrangements they actually were. Despite heavy promotion by my parents, among their social circle sales remained virtually non-existent. As my parents approached their 60s, the financial strain became more evident. My mother returned to substitute teaching long after she had planned to retire. My father took on consulting work on weekends. Yet Melissa showed no signs of becoming self-sufficient. If anything, her demands increased as her sense of entitlement grew. She began talking about needing to expand her artistic horizons beyond their suburban Chicago setting. I maintained a polite distance from this situation, neither enabling nor directly confronting it. I had my own life in Boston, and my parents were adults who made their own financial decisions. I never imagined that their support of Melissa would eventually target my own hard-earned stability until the day they announced their plan to visit me in Boston with an exciting proposal. The text from my mother came on a Tuesday morning as I was heading into a meeting. "Your father and I are planning a visit to Boston next weekend. So excited to see your new place and catch up. Love you." It had been nearly 2 years since I'd seen my parents in person, our relationship maintained through occasional phone calls and holiday cards. Despite our complicated history, I felt a flicker of warmth at the prospect of showing them the home I had created. I spent the week before their visit deep cleaning the apartment, stocking the guest room with fresh linens, and planning activities that would showcase the best of Boston. Part of me still hoped for their approval, a lingering need I couldn't quite shake, despite years of independence. I even took Friday off work to prepare a welcome dinner of my father's favorite pot roast and my mother's preferred red wine. When they arrived Friday evening, their initial reaction to my apartment seemed positive. My mother admired the kitchen renovation, while my father commented on the building's historic architecture. They asked polite questions about my neighborhood and seemed genuinely interested in my responses. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe this might be a turning point in our relationship. The first hint of trouble came when my mother asked a pointed question about the second bedroom. "This is such a large space for just a guest room," she remarked, measuring the dimensions with her eyes. "It seems wasteful when you're the only one living here." My father followed with questions about my home office, wondering aloud if I really needed so much space for a computer desk. Still, I brushed off these comments and focused on enjoying our reunion dinner. The conversation flowed more easily than expected, though I noticed they carefully avoided mentioning Melissa. When I asked how she was doing, they exchanged glances before my mother answered vaguely. "She's at an important crossroads in her career." After dinner, as we settled in the living room with coffee, my father cleared his throat in a way I recognized from childhood as a prelude to serious discussions. "Owen," he began, "we've always been proud of how well you've done for yourself." The unexpected compliment caught me off guard, and I felt a momentary surge of the validation I'd sought for decades. "This apartment is really something," he continued. "Much nicer than we expected. Honestly, it got us thinking about how you could help your sister take her career to the next level." I felt a familiar sinking sensation. "What do you mean?" I asked, though. I already suspected where this was heading. My mother jumped in eagerly. "Boston has such a vibrant art scene, much better than Chicago for networking and galleries. Melissa needs to be in a cultural hub like this to really break through. We've been researching," my father added, "and the connections she could make here would be invaluable. The right environment could make all the difference." I nodded slowly, still not voicing what I knew they were suggesting. Part of me needed to hear them actually say it. My mother reached across and patted my hand. "So we were thinking, since you have this lovely apartment with the extra bedroom and that big office space, Melissa could move in with you. You could convert the office to a studio for her work. The lighting is perfect for painting." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for minutes, though it was probably only seconds. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline that never came. They were serious. They had traveled across the country to ask me to give up my personal space in my own home to accommodate the sister who had been given everything I had to work for. "And where exactly would I work?" I finally asked, my voice carefully controlled. My father waved dismissively. "You could set up a desk in your bedroom or use a corner of the living room. Your job is mostly on the computer anyway, right? You don't need all that space." "Or," my mother added brightly, as if offering a wonderful alternative, "you could look for a smaller place. Housing is so expensive in Boston, and this apartment is really too big for one person. Melissa needs the space for her canvases and supplies." I took a deep breath, trying to process what they were actually suggesting. "Let me get this straight. You want me to either convert half of my home into a studio for Melissa, cramp myself into a corner, and live with a roommate I never asked for, or give up my apartment entirely and move somewhere smaller so she can have the whole place. When you put it that way, it sounds so negative, my mother frowned. We're talking about family helping family. Melissa is at a crucial point in her career development. And what about my career? I asked. I work from home 3 days a week. I need my office space. My father's expression hardened slightly. Owen, you're already established. You have a good job, financial security. Melissa is still trying to make her breakthrough. As the successful one, don't you think you should help your sister achieve her dreams too? The familiar dynamic crashed down around me. Once again, my achievements were being minimized, while Melissa's potential was elevated above reality. Once again, I was expected to sacrifice while she received. Dad, I bought this apartment with money I earned. I renovated it myself. This is my home that I worked for years to afford. And we're very impressed. My mother interjected her tone, suggesting I was being praised for a child's crayon drawing rather than a major life achievement. But family supports each other. Melissa really needs this opportunity. Has she looked into artist residency programs, shared studio spaces, part-time jobs to support herself while building her portfolio? I asked, knowing the answers already. My father's face flushed with anger. Not everyone can focus on money the way you do, Owen. Melissa has a gift. She needs nurturing, not some soul-crushing job. So instead, you want to crush my space, my privacy, and my boundaries. The calm I'd been maintaining began to crack. We thought you'd be more generous, my mother said, tears forming in her eyes. After all we've done for you. This pushed me over the edge. What exactly have you done for me? You spent my college fund on Melissa's art supplies. I worked through school while she got a free ride. I built my career and bought this place without any help from either of you. The argument escalated quickly from there. My father accused me of being selfish and materialistic. My mother cried about how I'd always been difficult and uncooperative. When I refused to budge, my father dropped the pretense of asking and moved to demanding. After everything we sacrificed for you growing up, this is how you repay us. By refusing to help your sister when she needs it most. What kind of son does that make you? I looked at the strangers sitting in my living room. These people who had never seen me clearly, who had spent decades minimizing my needs and efforts while elevating my sister's. In that moment, something shifted permanently inside me. I think it's time for you to leave, I said quietly. My mother gasped. You're throwing us out. We came all this way. Yes, you came all this way to demand I give up my home for Melissa. Not to visit me, not to reconnect, but to take something else from me. And I'm done giving. They left in a fury of slammed doors and angry threats. My father's parting words echoed in the hallway. You'll regret this selfishness, Owen. Family is all that matters in the end. As I cleaned up the half-eaten dinner and poured myself a strong drink, I wondered if I would indeed regret standing my ground. But the overwhelming feeling was not regret, but relief, as if I'd finally removed a heavy weight I'd been carrying since childhood. The morning after my parents left, my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, voicemails, emails, and social media alerts created a symphony of guilt and manipulation that continued for days. My parents had wasted no time in launching a full-scale campaign to pressure me into changing my mind. My father's voicemails started with angry tirades about my selfish betrayal and gradually shifted to guilt-laden monologues about family obligation. After all the sacrifices we made raising you, one message began conveniently forgetting how I had been left to fend for myself financially since my teens. My mother took a different approach, leaving tearful messages about how I was breaking her heart and destroying the family with my cold-hearted refusal to help poor Melissa. What surprised me most was how quickly they mobilized the extended family. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I barely spoke to suddenly found time to reach out with their opinions on my personal housing situation. Uncle Robert, who had missed my college graduation, now had strong feelings about my spare bedroom usage. Aunt Patricia, who couldn't remember my birthday, lectured me via email about the importance of sibling support. Your grandfather would be ashamed, wrote a cousin, who had met our grandfather exactly twice before he passed away. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same relatives who had never acknowledged my academic achievements or career success were now deeply invested in my housing decisions. Melissa herself took the battle to social media, posting vague but pointed updates about toxic family members and the struggle of being an artist in a materialistic world. Without naming me directly, she crafted a narrative where she was the victimized creative spirit being crushed by practical, unfeeling relatives who didn't understand her artistic journey. Some people will never understand that art requires space and light to flourish, she wrote, beneath a dramatically lit selfie, showing her looking pensively at an empty canvas. Doors are closing, but true artists find windows. The post received dozens of sympathetic comments from friends who had no idea what she was actually referencing. My mother shared these posts with additional commentary, heartbreaking to see my daughter's dreams crushed by circumstances beyond her control. Again, no direct mention of me, but anyone in the family circle knew exactly what she meant. The careful public crafting of narrative while privately bombarding me with direct accusations was masterfully manipulative. The pressure intensified when my parents threatened to remove me from their will. "We've spoken with our lawyer," my father said, in one particularly hostile call. "Since you clearly don't value family, we're making appropriate adjustments to reflect that." The threat might have carried more weight if I had ever counted on an inheritance, but financial independence had been my reality for so long that this felt like an empty gesture. 3 weeks into this pressure campaign, my intercom buzzed on a Sunday morning. When I checked the building's security camera, I was shocked to see Melissa standing at the entrance with 3 large suitcases and several portfolio cases. I hadn't heard she was coming to Boston. When I reluctantly buzzed her in and opened my door, her first words weren't a greeting, but a demand. "Which room is going to be my studio?" She walked past me into the apartment, as if her residency had already been established. "Melissa, what are you doing here?" I asked, watching in disbelief, as she began examining the lighting in my office. "Mom and Dad said you were being difficult about the arrangement, so I decided to come handle it myself." She set down a portfolio case and began measuring the dimensions of my desk with her eyes. "This will need to go, obviously. I need the entire wall for my canvases." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. She continued moving through my home, commenting on changes she planned to make, completely ignoring my growing anger. When she entered my bedroom and remarked that I could easily fit a small desk in the corner, I finally found my voice. "You need to leave, now." My tone left no room for negotiation. She turned to me with genuine surprise. "Don't be ridiculous. I've already given notice on my room at home. My supplies are being shipped tomorrow." "That was premature," I said firmly. "I never agreed to this arrangement. This is my home, and you weren't invited to live here." What followed was a tantrum that would have been embarrassing from a toddler, let alone a woman in her 30s. Melissa screamed about my selfishness, threw one of my decorative pillows across the room, and accused me of sabotaging her career out of jealousy. "You've always resented my talent," she shouted. "You and your boring computer job, and your boring life." When it became clear I wouldn't budge, she stormed into the hallway, creating such a scene that several neighbors opened their doors. "My own brother is throwing me out on the street," she wailed theatrically. "I have nowhere to go." I maintained my composure, offering to help her find a hotel, and even to pay for a few nights while she figured out her next steps. This reasonable offer only inflamed her further. "I don't need your charity. I need a studio in Boston." After she finally left, still crying loudly enough for the entire building to hear, I received an apologetic text from the building manager. "Sorry about the disturbance. A woman claiming to be your sister called the office 3 times this week, asking about your lease terms and if the building allows residential art studios. Thought you should know." The realization that Melissa had been investigating my living situation behind my back was unsettling, but what came next was truly alarming. 2 days later, I received an alert from my home security system while at work. The notification showed video of Melissa attempting to enter my apartment with a key. She tried several times before giving up and leaving a note taped to my door. I immediately called the building manager, who confirmed what I feared. Melissa had claimed to be my roommate who had locked herself out, and the part-time weekend doorman, unfamiliar with residents, had given her access to the Y building. The note she left contained no apology, only another demand that I stop being childish and accept the inevitable. That evening, I changed all my locks and upgraded to a more sophisticated security system. I also sent a firm email to my parents explaining that any further attempts to enter my home without permission would result in a formal trespassing complaint. Their response was a barrage of messages calling me paranoid and accusing me of criminalizing family concerns. The situation escalated further when my mother apparently called my employer's HR department, claiming a family emergency that required my immediate return to Chicago. Fortunately, my manager knew enough about my family situation to find this suspicious and checked with me first. The attempted manipulation of my professional life crossed a line I couldn't ignore. On the advice of a close friend, I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in harassment cases. After reviewing the evidence of repeated unwanted contact, attempted unauthorized entry, and interference with my workplace, she helped me draft a cease and desist letter that was sent to both my parents and Melissa. The letter had an immediate effect, though not the one I hoped for. Rather than recognizing boundaries, my family chose to cut contact entirely. My father sent a brief text. "Since you've chosen lawyers over family, consider yourself no longer part of ours." My mother's final message was equally terse. "I never thought my son would treat us this way. Your sister is devastated. I hope your empty apartment brings you joy." The weeks that followed were surprisingly difficult. Even though our relationship had been strained for years, the finality of this break hit me harder than expected. I threw myself into work during the day, but evenings in my apartment felt hollow. I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family estrangement, which helped me process the complex emotions of grief, relief, and lingering guilt. Gradually, I rebuilt my sense of security and peace. Friends became more important than ever, creating a chosen family that offered genuine support without manipulation. I reconnected with my mother's brother, Uncle James, who had experienced similar treatment years earlier when he refused to loan money for one of Melissa's art projects. His perspective and understanding were invaluable during this period. Just as I was finding my equilibrium again, I received a call from an acquaintance who worked at a prominent Boston gallery. "I thought you should know," she said cautiously. "There's a woman here claiming to be a featured artist in our upcoming exhibition. She's making a scene because her name isn't on the promotional materials. She says her name is Melissa, and she mentioned she's your sister." Apparently, Melissa had traveled to Boston again, telling our parents she had secured representation with this gallery. When she arrived and discovered her lie was about to be exposed, she created a disturbance, insisting there had been a mistake. The gallery owner, baffled by her claims, checked their records thoroughly before asking her to leave. Rather than admitting her fabrication, Melissa doubled down, posting a lengthy rant on social media about being erased from an exhibition she had worked months to prepare for. She implied professional sabotage without directly accusing me, but the insinuation was clear to anyone following the family drama. This public meltdown marked a turning point in the family dynamics. For the first time, extended family members and parents' friends saw through the carefully constructed narrative. The gallery owner, irritated by the false claims, issued a public statement clarifying that Melissa had never been affiliated with their establishment. The embarrassment forced her to retreat from social media temporarily, and I heard through family channels that my parents were finally questioning her version of events. The attempted break-in and gallery incident marked a breaking point not just for me, but for the entire family system. The facade of Melissa, as the misunderstood artistic genius, began crumbling when faced with real-world consequences. My security camera footage of her attempting to enter my apartment with a copied key was irrefutable evidence that crossed the line from family pressure to potentially criminal behavior. After consulting with my lawyer, I decided not to file a police report, but I did send the video to my parents with a clear message. This is not a family disagreement anymore. This is breaking and entering. Their initial response was defensive, claiming Melissa was just trying to talk to me and that I was overreacting to a desperate situation. But even they couldn't fully justify her actions when confronted with the visual evidence. The building management took the security breach seriously. They implemented new protocols for visitor verification and sent a formal warning to Melissa that she was not authorized to enter the building without my express permission. The doorman who had unknowingly helped her gain access received additional training, and my neighbors, now aware of the situation, became unofficial lookouts. My lawyer advised strengthening my legal position by documenting all past interactions. I spent a weekend compiling text messages, emails, voicemails, and social media posts that demonstrated the pattern of harassment. This digital paper trail became crucial when my lawyer drafted a more comprehensive cease and desist letter that outlined potential legal consequences if the behavior continued. This isn't what I wanted. I told my therapist during a particularly difficult session. I never imagined having to legally protect myself from my own family. Family systems resist change, she explained gently. When you disrupted the pattern they've relied on for decades by standing firm, instead of giving in, the system intensified its efforts to pull you back into your assigned role. The legal boundaries are necessary until they accept that the old dynamics no longer work. The most surprising development came when my Uncle James reached out to say he'd received a call from my father. He was asking questions about how I've managed without family support all these years, James explained. I think reality is starting to sink in for them. Melissa's Boston gallery fiasco was publicly embarrassing in a way they couldn't spin or explain away. For 6 weeks, there was complete silence from my immediate family. No calls, no texts, no social media drama. I used this period to strengthen my support network and focus on healing. I joined a support group for adults dealing with family estrangement where I met others with similar experiences. Their stories helped me understand that what I had experienced had a name: family scapegoating. As the group facilitator explained, in dysfunctional families, one child often becomes the repository for family problems while another is elevated to an idealized status. Just as I was adjusting to this new normal, I received an unexpected email from my father. Unlike his previous communications, this one was measured and subdued. "Your mother and I have been doing some thinking," he wrote. "We may have been hasty in our approach to the Boston situation. Melissa has decided to pursue opportunities in Chicago for now. We hope we can open a dialogue again at some point." Reading between the lines, I suspected financial reality had finally caught up with them. Supporting Melissa's fantasy art career in Boston without my assistance would be exponentially more expensive than continuing to house her in their Chicago home. What struck me most about the email was its careful avoidance of an actual apology or acknowledgement of boundary violations. My response was brief but clear. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship gradually, but only with clear boundaries and mutual respect. My home is my own, and that's non-negotiable. I didn't receive a direct reply, but the family pressure campaign officially ended. 3 months after the initial confrontation, I received a surprising call from my cousin Allison, who had always been closer to Melissa. "I thought you should know," she said hesitantly. "Aunt Sarah's birthday dinner is this weekend, and Melissa showed up with big news. She's taken a job at an art supply store. Your parents looked shell-shocked." The news wasn't delivered with malice, but rather a sense of confused wonder. In our family mythology, Melissa working a retail job was as unexpected as the sun rising in the west. According to Allison, Melissa had framed it as researching the industry from the inside and networking with real artists. But everyone recognized the fundamental shift. The fantasy of immediate artistic success had finally collided with financial necessity. Through various family channels, I learned that my parents had finally set some financial boundaries with Melissa. Their retirement accounts had been severely depleted, and my father's health issues had forced him to fully retire. They simply couldn't continue funding her lifestyle indefinitely. The apartment confrontation had been their last desperate attempt to maintain the status quo by transferring the financial burden to me. When that failed, the carefully constructed fantasy began unraveling. Melissa's social media presence shifted from glamorous artistic poses to complaints about unappreciative customers and early morning shifts. Her art posts became less frequent, as the reality of working 40 hours a week left less time for creative pursuits. Ironically, this forced independence might have been the best thing for her artistic development. Without the cushion of parental support and the pressure of being the family's designated creative genius, she began creating smaller, more authentic pieces during her limited free time. A mutual friend reported that these works showed more genuine emotion and technical improvement than anything she'd produced during her years of unlimited support. As for me, the apartment that had been the center of so much family drama truly became my sanctuary. I redecorated my office, replacing the desk my sister had eyed so covetously with a custom-built workstation that better suited my needs. The guest bedroom that my parents had tried to claim for Melissa became a small library and meditation space where I could process the complex emotions of the past year. My therapist helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for fixing my family's dysfunctional dynamics. You disrupted a system that wasn't serving anyone. Well, not even Melissa, she pointed out. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to participate in patterns that keep everyone stuck. 6 months after the initial confrontation, I received a wedding invitation from my cousin Samantha. Attending would mean seeing my parents and Melissa for the first time since the estrangement. After careful consideration and discussion with my support group, I decided to go viewing it as a controlled environment for a potential first step toward healing. The 6 months of no contact with my immediate family became a period of profound personal growth. Without the constant drain of their demands and disapproval, I discovered parts of myself that had been suppressed for decades. I developed new friendships, explored hobbies beyond work, and even started dating more confidently. My therapist observed that I was finally living for myself rather than in reaction to family expectations. Through various family channels, I received occasional updates about Melissa's situation. Her art career had indeed collapsed without the backdrop of parental financing and my apartment as a potential launching pad. The reality check seemed to be having a mixed but ultimately positive effect on her development. Her job at the art supply store had started as a reluctant compromise, but gradually evolved into something more stable. According to my cousin Allison, Melissa had been promoted to the custom framing department, where her art school training actually proved useful. For perhaps the first time in her life, she was earning recognition based on genuine skills rather than family-promoted potential. My parents faced their own difficult adjustments. With retirement savings severely depleted from years of supporting Melissa, they were living on a tighter budget than anticipated. My father had taken a part-time consulting position to supplement their income, and my mother had sold the SUV she'd driven for years in favor of a more economical vehicle. These weren't devastating hardships, but they represented a significant lifestyle adjustment for people who had never expected financial constraints in their golden years. More significantly, their identity as Melissa's promoters and financiers had been disrupted. Without this role that had defined them for decades, they were forced to reconsider their relationship with both their children and with each other. I heard through Uncle James that they had started marriage counseling addressing long-ignored issues that had been masked by their shared focus on Melissa's supposed artistic destiny. For me, the apartment that had become the center of so much family drama evolved into a true sanctuary. I completed additional renovations, creating spaces that reflected my personality and needs rather than considering resale value or others' opinions. The home office that Melissa had tried to claim became my favorite room, redesigned with custom bookshelves and a workspace that inspired creativity in my own way. The dreaded cousin Samantha's wedding finally arrived, marking my first face-to-face encounter with my immediate family since the estrangement. I arrived with a close friend as my plus one, partly for moral support and partly to have a witness to any potential drama. We had developed a signal and exit strategy if things became too intense. The initial encounter with my parents was awkward but civil. My mother attempted a stiff hug while my father offered a formal handshake. We exchanged pleasantries about the wedding decorations and avoided any mention of the past year's conflict. Their careful distance suggested they were as uncertain about this reunion as I was. Melissa arrived late, making an entrance that turned several heads. Her appearance had changed subtly but significantly. Gone were the deliberately bohemian clothes and artistic accessories she had worn for years. Instead, she was dressed in a simple but elegant dress that suggested a new pragmatism. When our eyes met across the reception hall, she gave a small nod of acknowledgement, but made no immediate move to approach me. Later, as guests mingled between dinner courses, Melissa and I found ourselves alone at the dessert table. The silence stretched uncomfortably until she finally spoke. "Your tie matches your eyes," she said the observation. So mundane and unexpected that I almost laughed. "Thanks," I replied. "How's the framing department treating you?" A flash of surprise crossed her face, presumably that I knew about her job. "It's actually not terrible," she admitted. "I'm good at it. The employee discount on supplies doesn't hurt either." We managed a 5-minute conversation that carefully avoided any mention of apartments Boston or the past year's drama. As she turned to leave, she hesitated. "For what it's worth, I was wrong about the apartment," she said quickly, then walked away before I could respond. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement which felt like significant progress given our history. My parents approached me toward the end of the reception, their body language, suggesting they had rehearsed this moment. "We've been doing some thinking," my father began, echoing the wording from his email months earlier. "We may have been overzealous in our approach to Melissa's career." My mother nodded. "We've realized some things about how we've handled family matters over the years. We're trying to do better." Again, it wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than they had ever demonstrated before. I acknowledged their statement with a nod, offering neither absolution nor rejection. "I'm glad to hear that. It's been a difficult year for everyone. Would you be open to a phone call sometimes?" my mother asked, her voice carrying a vulnerability I rarely heard from her. "Just to check in. No pressure about visits or anything else." I agreed to occasional calls, setting the first boundary in what would need to be a carefully reconstructed relationship. "I'd like that, but I need us to move slowly and respect each other's space." In the months that followed, we established a new pattern of limited but more genuine interaction. Our conversations remained somewhat superficial, but without the undercurrent of manipulation that had characterized our previous relationship. They asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. I inquired about their health and activities without feeling obligated to solve their problems. Melissa and I developed a distant but cordial relationship conducted primarily through birthday cards and occasional text messages. She seemed to be finding her own path, taking evening classes in graphic design that offered a more practical application of her artistic interests. Her social media presence became less frequent but more authentic, showing real work rather than artistic poses. The most profound change, however, was within myself. The apartment that had become a battlefield was now truly my home, a physical manifestation of the boundaries I had finally established in all areas of my life. The hard-won lessons about family dynamics, self-worth, and the courage to stand firm had transformed me in ways I never expected. In therapy, I came to understand that the apartment had never really been about square footage or spare bedrooms. It represented something much more fundamental: my right to create a life on my own terms, free from the roles assigned to me in childhood. By defending this physical space, I had also defended my psychological space, breaking patterns that had constrained me for decades. Perhaps the most important lesson was learning to redefine family on my own terms. The people who truly supported and respected me, whether related by blood or not, became my real family. I built connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. These relationships, chosen rather than inherited, brought a depth of support I had never experienced in my family of origin. My apartment, once a source of conflict, became the gathering place for this chosen family. Dinner parties, game nights, and holiday celebrations filled the space with laughter and genuine warmth. The guest room that my parents had tried to claim for Melissa hosted friends from across the country, each visit healing a little more of the pain from that confrontation. Looking back, I realized that standing my ground about my apartment was never really about being selfish or ungenerous. It was about recognizing my worth and refusing to perpetuate unhealthy patterns. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to establish clear boundaries that allow everyone to grow into their best selves. I still live in that apartment now, filled with memories of my own making. Sometimes I think about how close I came to surrendering it, along with my autonomy to family pressure. The journey from that moment of standing firm to the peace I feel today wasn't easy, but it was absolutely necessary. What about you? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle the situation, and what did you learn from it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about navigating complex family dynamics and building a life on your own terms. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that creating healthy boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-care.